Hi everyone, this is my video assignment number 1 for strength and conditioning. My name is Kaylan Puett. First, we're going to start with the general warm-up. Today's video is going to be with my client Scott. As I had him start with a slight jog just to get all the muscles warming up and to increase that heart rate just to start off. Starting off with a jog is a great idea just because it increases the body temperature very easily and it gets all the muscles moving synergistically together very, very fast. The most important part of a warm-up is to increase the temperature of the body, which also increases the blood flow and oxygen, which are needed before the workout. In this workout, we're looking for hypertrophy as well as muscle strengthening, as you'll see in the rest of the video. However, it's still really important to start off with some cardio or anything to get your body moving. That way we lower the risk of injury when he's lifting weights and also increase the ability of the muscles to be able to be ready for the performance. Keep in mind, we're not trying to exhaust him all the way, so I just had him jog for 1 minute. After the jog, we quickly moved into some other movements just to keep that heart rate elevated. First, he started off with some jumping jacks. Again, this is a really good exercise involving every single muscle, just really focusing on the heart rate, the blood flow, and getting all the muscles warmed up and ready to go. For the jumping jacks, I had the client go for about 30 seconds just to really get those calves and legs jumping and ready to go. Next, I had the client go into what's called lateral shuffles. This exercise is really common in a lot of athletes. Primarily, we can see this exercise coming from basketball, soccer, any of those sports where you do have to get low and get the hip flexors and the adductor muscles ready. As you can see here, I was instructing the client to stay low as we want all those muscles really getting warmed up before we go into any deep squats or lunges as the exercises progress through the workout. And again, I had him complete about 30 seconds of those before moving on to high knees. As we all know, this one is a little bit challenging, but we want to make sure that we are pushing the client or yourself as you work out. Doing these is really going to get your quadriceps muscles as well as a lot of your gluteus, maximus, minimus, medius muscles ready, as well as the calf muscles. Again, the most important part is elevating the heart rate here to really lower the risk of injury as we do those lower body exercises. I also had the client go for 30 seconds on those high knees before moving into what's called butt kickers. Here, we're really focusing on those quadricep muscles as they're stretched dynamically as the heel goes back to the gluteus. Again, this is a cardio-based exercise, just as we're warming up. Again, while we're doing these, we're lessening the muscle tension and the pain just to make sure that we don't injure ourselves again, as well as dilating the blood vessels to pump blood easier. After having the client complete those 30 seconds of the butt kickers, we moved on to inchworms. Here we call these inchworms because we're starting out at climbing out to the front, coming into a full plank, and then inching our way back with our toes. Here we can see a little bit of inflexibility in my client, but that's okay. We still want to make sure that we're getting that full body experience as coming out to that plank and coming back up. Here you really want to make sure that your hamstrings and the backside of your legs is coming up as straight as possible. This is going to be a little bit varying from client to client just due to flexibility of that backside or the hamstring muscles, and that's okay, but this is a really great exercise to make sure that we're warming up our core and making it synergist with all the rest of the muscles. Moving on, after 30 seconds of those, we're going to go into a slow march, just really driving that knee up. This is really going to open up our hip flexors and our quadricep muscles as we drive that knee up. The leg that's stationed on the bottom is going to be the one that is being stretched. However, we want to make sure that we're not standing in that position and we're continuously moving dynamically. Also, depending on your balance, you can have the client go a little bit slower or a little bit faster. Just make sure that you're engaging your core at all times. Here, we're going to go ahead and move on to a quad stretch, but we want to make sure that, again, since it is during our warm-up, we want to make sure it is a dynamic stretch. That way we're not statically stretching out any of our muscles. Here, you can also see that this will provide balance as well. Some clients may have the trouble of the balance, so you want to make sure that we're spotting them from each angle just to make sure that they're not falling over and they're being safe at all times. This exercise and this warm-up is primarily to get those quads ready for all of the exercises that we will be performing in the main sequence. After completing 30 seconds of those, we want to move on to what I like to call jimmy jumps. These are also known as vertical jumps with also involvement of the hand movement. These may be performed without the hand movement of going up and down. However, I like to include this to make sure that we're warming up not only the legs with the calf muscles, the hamstrings, the quadriceps, and the glutes, but we're also involving the upper body. This will also include our latissimus dorsi muscles, which will be really worked during our sequence, and we want to make sure that they're ready to go. After 30 seconds of those, we are going to move on to what's called a pulsing squat. These are where you're doing them in a sumo stance. We chose to do these in a sumo stance just to make sure that we're hitting a little bit more of the muscles as well as elevating that heart rate a little bit more. Here you can see the client going into full range of motion, pulsing at the bottom and coming back up. These are really good for elevating the heart rate, getting the body warm, and getting those legs working and moving before the main workout exercises. After 30 seconds of those, we want to give ourselves a big high five as we move on to our specific warm-up. To start our specific warm-up, I had the client start with knee up to the chest. These are also known as knee huggers. As he grabs the lower part of his knee, he's going to go ahead and pull that up, and this is also done dynamically. The purpose of a specific warm-up is to target the muscles that we are going to be used during the workout. This is important because as we already elevated our heart rate, this is also going to prepare each and every muscle before we put any weight on it. After 30 seconds of those, the client's going to go ahead and move into body weight squats. These are going to be done with a controlled speed. As you can see, he's going down all the way down to his full range of motion. This is very important to do in the specific warm-up because, again, as you will see later in this video, we are going to be doing a fair amount of squats. So doing a body weight is very beneficial before putting any weight upon the back. After 30 seconds of those, we moved into a gentle shoulder rotation. Here, he's taking his shoulders and going all the way up to the ears and going all the way forward as well. This is going to improve his range of motion in his shoulder. Shoulders also are a ball in the socket joint, which can make the joint easier to pop out during the workout. So we want to make sure that the muscles surrounding the joint are fully ready for the workout. After he completes 30 seconds of going forward, you can see the client change positions as he rotates back. This will get him ready for the initiation of those muscles in the front of the deltoid as well as the posterior side of the deltoid. This may also include the involvement of the trapezius, as we will also be working out in today's workout. Just like the shoulders going forward, he's going to complete 30 seconds of them going back as well, just to really loosen them up. After those deltoids and the trapezius are nice and warm, we're going to go ahead and move on to alternating lunges. Here, you may have seen lunges used as a main workout, which we will also see later on in this video. However, during the specific warm-up, we're focusing more on stretching that muscle dynamically. As you can see, the client never holds the lunge out in front of him for too long. We want to make sure that they're always moving through the full range of motion and focusing on stretching the front leg as well as the back leg with the hip flexors, the hamstrings, the quads, and the glutes. This is a really, really great warm-up for the legs. After 30 seconds of those, you can see as we move on to leg swings. Here he's going to start off with his right leg. As you can see, he's going to come up all the way to about hip height or a little bit taller than that. Here the height will depend on the client. As you can see here, he does have pretty good flexibility here. We want to make sure that the knee is slightly bent, but not too bent. Here, he's going to complete 15 seconds per side just to really loosen up those muscles and get them the flexibility going. After those 15 seconds per side, we're going to go ahead and move back up to the upper body with just some shoulder and upper body swings. This is a really good one. As you can see, as he swings his arms backward, he's engaging all of the upper back muscles. This will include his trapezius, his rhomboids, posterior deltoids, and latissimus dorsi muscles, as well as when he swings his arms forward, he's engaging his pectoralis major and minor muscles. After 30 seconds of those, he's going to go ahead and move on to a dynamic cross-body shoulder stretch. This is mainly good for his deltoid muscles, as we will be using them a lot during the workout. We want to make sure that they're as limber as possible and really warmed up before we add any weight to them as well. This will also improve his performance with or without weight as we go into those shoulder exercises in the main sequence. After 30 seconds of those, he's going to go ahead and move on to a windmill exercise. Here is a really good full body warm-up. As you can see, as he bends forward, he's touching the opposite toe, creating a really good stretch in the opposing hamstring muscle. This is also good to make sure that the back muscles are engaged to keep his back fairly tight and fairly straight as possible. After 30 seconds of those, he's going to go ahead and move on to a very dynamic stretch as he goes into a quad stretch behind him all the way up into a high knee. This exercise, as well as very many similar exercises, are really highly used in some athletic performance athletes as well, due to the fact that it is a highly balanced, focused exercise. Here you can see my client struggling a little bit, so if your client or yourself is, we want to make sure that we are being safe and maintaining some type of stability. Here, if the client or yourself is struggling, as you go into that quad stretch behind you, you can also take a break right in the middle by tapping your foot before coming up into the high knee. Remember that doing these exercises and these warm-ups are primarily just to make sure that your body's ready. So if this is a challenging exercise, we want to make sure that it's still safe. Warm-ups should be used for every single workout client. We want to make sure that we're being safe and elevating that temperature. In doing so, there's many benefits that come about it, including better range of motion, like just the squat we just saw a second ago, as well as improved performance in all areas. If the client is looking for hypertrophy or muscle strength, doing a warm-up can definitely help with being able to execute the motion a lot faster, a lot easier, with more power, and also with more strength. After 30 seconds each of those, we are going to go ahead and move into what's called a standing calf stretch. Here you can see me in a kickstand base position as the front foot is fully placed onto the ground. We want to make sure that the client has the back foot started on the tippy toe in a plantar flexed position. Once they're comfy, they want to make sure that they are going to place that heel right on the ground slowly as the calf muscle is stretched. Here you can see my client has great ankle flexibility, mobility. In some cases, this may not be the case. Therefore, we want to make sure we take this really slow to avoid injury as well, even in the warm-up. This stretch is going to be really good, especially if we're working on some jumps or anything to do with any plantar flex position during the workout. After 15 seconds on that side, he's going to go ahead and switch to the other side. We want to make sure that during every warm-up, that if we're doing it in a bilateral movement, we're doing the same exact time on the other side. This will help with any imbalances in any muscles, as well as the flexibility in each muscle. After he completed that exercise, we went into our last exercise of the specific general warm-up. This was our body weight Romanian deadlift. As you can see, I went ahead and showed him how to do it first. Here we want to make sure that our palms are on the front facing side of our quads, and we want to make sure that we're evenly going down just the top of our legs all the way until we feel that stretch in the hamstring. It is important that we don't go too fast during this exercise to pull a hamstring as well, but mainly this is to strengthen or to stretch out our hamstrings as we go down into the motion. Here you can see me reposition the client as I make sure that his back is straight at all times going down. You also want to make sure that the head is in line at all times, making sure that the curve of the neck is not putting a strain on the neck or the trapezius muscles. And again, after 30 seconds of that, we want to give a good high five because we're done with the warm-up and onto our main sequence of exercises. Modality number 1, using a barbell. Upper body overhead press. Here we start with the overhead press exercise. In this exercise, I had the client get into about a shoulder width apart stance with his feet, and as he pushed the bar up, he was focusing on the development of the anterior deltoid muscles of the shoulder, maintaining the same motion all the way throughout the exercise. Typical errors that you can find in this exercise is that the client is leaning the upper portion of the shoulder back, creating an overextension of the back. So you want to make sure that their back is staying straight as possible and in line. It is also a good cue to let your client know to lean their head back a little bit as the bar comes down, which will prevent any injury of the client. Next is the overhead press with slow eccentric movement. For the second variation of this exercise, we chose to do an overhead press with a slow eccentric movement. This was to stimulate a greater neural response. So as the weight is controlled with lengthening the muscle, even though it isn't focused on the eccentric movement, it is still targeting that anterior deltoid muscle, and the stance would be the same on this exercise. He then completed this set for 3 sets of 10. Overhead press with kickstand base. For this variation of the exercise, the client is now placed into a different position. This is going to be what's called a kickstand base. The front foot will be flat on the floor, and the back one will be into a plantar flex position. This is due to the fact that some people will have an issue with curving their lower back and engaging that lower back while doing the exercise. This will prevent that from happening, and it'll also engage their core as they push up. Other clients may also experience them being able to push a higher weight in this stance just due to the fact of stability. For this exercise, he did complete 3 sets of 10. Lower body barbell squats, back squats. With the barbell back squat, I start with showing the client where to place the barbell on his back. For this type of exercise, it is really important to make sure that the bar is sturdy on his back and to make sure that it is fully supported before unracking the weights. As you can see here, I'm just making sure that his shoulders are even with the bar length and that all the weight is supported on each side equally. I'm also just going ahead and checking his foot position. In the barbell squat, we would like to keep the feet about shoulder width apart and the toes directly in front of him or slightly out. This is due to the comfortability of the client and the hip flexibility of the individual that you're working with. During this exercise, he is targeting the leg muscles, including the quadriceps, the hamstrings, the glutes, and also the abdominals. Next is barbell front squats. In this exercise, I start by showing the client how to set up the front squats. To do this, I started by letting him know that the bar should be placed on his shoulders in the front, while his 2 fingers to 3 fingers are supporting the bar on top of his shoulders. Also, it's really important to keep your elbows very high in here to just secure that bar in front of you so that it fully supports the bar on the shoulders and has a lesser chance at it falling forward. As I walk around the client, I am observing his feet position as well as his knees and where they're headed. In this exercise, we want the feet to be fully flat on the floor, and we're watching for any heel elevation, which is a common error in this exercise. We want to make sure that we're cueing our clients to fully brace their abdominals to fully support the weight on their shoulders as well. This can lead to a common injury if they're rounding their back as well. We want to make sure that all the way from C7 all the way down their vertebral column, they are having a straight back and their knees are following their toes at all times. The main difference of a back squat versus a front squat is the involvement of the abdominals. In the front squat, we are targeting the abdominals a lot more. However, for the rest of the leg muscles, the involvement remains the same. For this exercise, the client did 3 sets of 10 reps. Sumo squats, also known as wide stance barbell squats. For the sumo stance squat, I start with reminding the client to keep the bar sturdy on his back, and then I went into showing the stance of the sumo stance squat. For this one, we wanted to make sure that the foot placement was definitely wider than just a regular back squat. With this one, it's almost as double shoulder width apart, and we want to make sure that the toes are also pointed out. As you just saw as well, I'm making sure that the weight is evenly distributed on his shoulders and that both of his heels were lined up as well. This is important to do with any client or on yourself when doing any type of back squat to ensure that we have the weight evenly distributed and we're not making any type of imbalances in our body. As well, on top of that, if you're working with an older adult, it's also important for their balance, as when they come up, it will be extremely difficult if those things are not in line. This exercise does work many of the same muscles as a regular back squat and the front squat. However, this does put a little bit of extra attention on the gluteus muscles, as well as the adductors, the hip flexors, and the calves, as they stabilize him in this position. Modality number 2, using dumbbells. Upper body lateral raises. For the standing lateral raise, you are mainly focusing on the muscles of the deltoid, primarily the lateral deltoids. You may also use some part of the front deltoids and some of the upper trapezius a bit too while stabilizing the weight so it doesn't come forward or back. It is important to keep a slight bend in the elbows to just prevent injury, as well as come up only to shoulder height. Here you can see I'm adjusting the client to make sure that he is upright as much as possible. Leaning forward too much may cause the exercise to be a different muscle group. Many common errors that I see in this exercise is going too far above the shoulders. As you can see here, the client was going a little bit too high, so we just adjust that by giving them a target to keep that below the shoulder. And again, he did 3 sets of 10. The second variation is lateral raises with externally rotated grip. When changing the grip of the lateral raise, we are still working the deltoid muscles, and primarily we are working the medial or the middle deltoid muscles. However, with the externally rotated grip, we are allowing for external rotation of the shoulder. That way we get a little bit more strength in that area as well as the trapezius is also being the synergist here and helping out since the thumb is rotated towards the top. With the change in grip, many clients may experience this exercise being a little bit more difficult just due to the extra elements of the exercise. Therefore, you may need to adjust the weight of the client in between sets. He did 3 sets of 10. Next, we have alternating lateral raises with pronated grip. With the alternating lateral raise, we are working the same muscles as the first lateral raise that we saw before. However, with this one, we are giving a break to each arm in between, which also puts a focus on the abdominals and the external obliques because we also have to stabilize to not rock back and forth. That is a common error that we see with this exercise is leaning towards the side that the weight is going up and pushing the hip towards that side as well. This can cause an imbalance and also for the muscle not to reach its full potential while doing this exercise. Here you can see the client doing an excellent job at keeping the hips forward and keeping it stabilized as well. We also want to make sure that the client is keeping his head neutral and also keeping the arms going straight up, just about shoulder height and not above that, just to maintain safety on the shoulders as well. With these, he also did 3 sets of 10. With the dumbbells lower body, we're going to start with goblet squats. Goblet squats, although they are a lower body exercise, also hit many other muscles as well while doing the exercise. Here I'm showing the client how to set up the goblet squat. Here you will go ahead and grab that goblet squat. He's going to place his arms underneath the top of the dumbbell, get into position in a shoulder width stance with his toes slightly pointed out. Here I'm making sure that the client's back is completely straight and that he's getting the full range of motion. Also from the front, we want to make sure that his knees are also following his toes and not going over as well. The main focus here is to gain glutes and quadriceps as well as the hamstring strength and hypertrophy. These are great for those. However, this exercise also does hit the arms and grip strength as he has to hold the weight underneath his chin, and it also hits the entire core as it is a front weight exercise. During the entire part of the exercise, the weight is pulling the client forward, therefore he has to engage all the core muscles to keep his body upright. Since this is the case, we can see a common error of people going forward too much and also rounding their back as they try to hold the weight in front of them. We want to make sure that we can lower the weight for them if that is the cause, and also just cue them to straighten up the back by squeezing the shoulder blades together in the posterior side of the body. On this one, he also did 3 sets of 10. Goblet squats with heels elevated. With the goblet squat with the heels elevated, we are using the same muscles as a normal goblet squat on a flat surface. However, this puts more of a focus on your quadriceps as the heels are elevated. The knees have an ability to drive forward as you go down into your squat, which causes your quadriceps to take over the majority of the movement. However, as you come up, we also do see an involvement of the hamstrings and the glutes as he drives up and locks his hips out in a triple extension form. Just like a normal on the floor goblet squat, we also see majority of the issue with the jutting forward of the upper body. Here you can see my client doing a very good job at keeping his back straight and coming straight down into that squat while engaging his core. In order to build the hypertrophy, we also had him do 3 sets of 10. Goblet box squats with step-up equipment. With this variation of a goblet squat, we are placing more of a focus on the balance aspect since it is elevated, as well as putting more of a focus on the adductor muscles as we try to keep the knees from pushing in. We also have to make sure that the knees are in line with the toes at all times while maintaining the trunk up and down posture. With this exercise, the movement itself does remain the same, as well as the positions of his hands and his toes as well. His toes are slightly pointed out with his feet flat on the ground and the dumbbell right underneath his chin. As he goes into the squat, the important part of doing this exercise is the ability to go low into the squat. As you can see, my client has the ability to go a little bit lower than he would if he were on a normal ground. This also creates more pressure onto the adductors as he has to stabilize himself from falling over or falling off of the platforms themselves. Modality number 3, using machines. Upper body assisted pull-ups. This assisted pull-up machine is great for anyone who is not able to do a pull-up by themselves with their body weight. It's really great to start with beginners or after a rehabilitation program as well, just to increase that strength before going on by themselves. Doing pull-ups is a great exercise for many, many different muscles, including the shoulders, back, chest, biceps, triceps, and many stabilizing muscles. This is a full upper body motion. As you can see, I just adjusted the weight on the machine. On this machine, it might be a little tricky for the client in the beginning because the heavier the weight, the easier it is, which is usually not the case. So in this case, we want to make sure that we're telling the client that the amount of weight that we're selecting is going to be the helping mechanism during their motion. On here, he's doing a normal neutral grip, as well as it being about shoulder width apart as well, mainly targeting those lats. Second variation is going to be wide grip assisted pull-up. Completing the wide grip pull-up does include majority of the same muscles as a normal pull-up. However, it mainly uses the traps and the latissimus dorsi to pull the weight up. With this being said, this exercise can be a lot harder than a normal pull-up for the client as it just goes down to 2 prime movers. With this exercise, we do see help coming from the core, the forearms, the shoulders, and other back synergists as it helps us pull up our weight. As you can see, my client is on the very end of the handlebar. This is going to create an obtuse angle as he pulls up, mainly to seclude the lats and the trapezius to pull. Common errors you may see with this exercise is the popping down. We want to make sure that we're controlling the movement at all times. That is mainly due to exhaustion. Neutral grip assisted pull-ups. Sticking with the main muscle used in a pull-up, we do see the use of the latissimus dorsi when we are pulling up in a neutral grip assisted pull-up. However, it also does have a great inclusion of the biceps brachii. Depending on the strength of your client, these may be looked at as an easier pull-up or as a harder pull-up, depending on their strength of their biceps and the included muscles of the arms as well. During this exercise, we want to make sure that our clients are coming straight down with their elbows straight to their sides. Many common injuries can happen if they are pulling with their elbows coming out or letting their elbows cave in as they pull up. In this, he completed 3 sets of 10. Lower body leg press in the neutral stance, 3 sets of 10. Here I'm just showing the client how to set up for the neutral stance leg press. Here I'm letting him know that it is in fact important to keep the toes, the knees, and the hips all in line during the entire movement. This will ensure that he hits the correct muscles. With that being said, with the neutral stance leg press, we are engaging our quads as well as our hamstrings, our gluteus, and also our calf muscles as we push the weight up. The most common mistake I see in this is locking out the knees. Want to make sure that they're being safe during the entire movement and keeping a little slight bend in their knees. Wide stance leg press with 3 sets of 10. To start the wide stance leg press, I showed the client how to position his feet in a wider than shoulder width stance. We want to make sure that we're pointing our toes out. During the leg press, you also want to keep the back flat onto the surface, as well as the glutes also on the seat as well. A common error we see with most of these is the gluteus coming off of the bench as they bring the knees in closer. This will deactivate the muscles and not allow them to have the full range of motion and the full power of the entire exercise. The wide stance leg press is awesome in case they want to not only target the quadriceps, the hamstrings, and the glutes, but also get a target in the adductor muscles, including the adductor longus, adductor brevis, and the adductor magnus as well, really targeting the inner side of the legs. While he maintains the knees in place of the toes, it causes those adductor muscles to be challenged. For the third variation, we have single leg press with 3 sets of 10. The single leg press is an awesome movement because it becomes a unilateral movement. In this, it can help with uneven development of your muscle size or your strength between your left and your right sides, and that way we can focus on one side at a time. Also, you can also see that it does increase the range of motion per side because you're not limited to your hip movement. Another thing to add is your core musculature is actually working harder. Since you are only using one side of your body, it's being pulled to the other side, so you have to stabilize that in order to push the weight up vertically. Modality number 4, TRX band. Upper body overhand grip back row, 3 sets of 10. For the overhand grip back row, I started by showing the client how to position himself to set up for the exercise. Here you're going to go into a diagonal position. I was just letting him know to pull back fully, to squeeze his shoulder blades in the back, and to keep his elbows underneath his shoulders. We want to make sure that the grip on the TRX band stays straight as well. We don't want any pulling of the wrists or anything like that. This exercise is great using the TRX bands to enhance the core musculature involvement as well, to stabilize himself, as well as the midline stability, and to strengthen the upper and lower back muscles. These back muscles include the lats, the rhomboids, the traps, and the posterior deltoids. Neutral grip back row for 3 sets of 10. On the neutral grip back row, I have the body positioned in the same area. However, the change is going to be on the grip. This neutral grip, you're going to have the palms facing inside and the thumbs pointing on top. Here you'll see him pull himself up and squeeze the shoulder blades together, causing a contraction of the upper back muscles. As you can see, I'm placing my hand on the back of him. This will make sure that he can put his mind to the muscle and know what muscle he's contracting as he goes up. The purpose of changing the grip may include a greater range of motion as he's able to come up a little bit further, leading to more hypertrophy and also strength in the entirety of the muscles. Underhand grip back row with 3 sets of 10. For the underhand grip back row for the TRX bands, the body again will be in the same position. However, the grip is going to change again. With this grip, it is an underhand grip, so we will have our palms facing the ceiling and a closed grip position. With this back row, it is important to keep the elbows in as well, tucked to the center of his body. This will also allow for a greater contraction of the biceps, as this is the cause of changing the grip. Not only does it hit the biceps brachii, but it also hits a lot of the upper back muscles, including the trapezius, the rhomboids, shoulder stabilizers, spinal erectors, and the deep abdominal muscles as well, to stabilize him at all times during the motion. You want to also make sure that the client is not swinging or jerking his body upward. Lower body lunges, starting with reverse lunges, 3 sets of 10. For the reverse lunges, I'm showing him how to do it here, just maintaining the 90-degree angle in the forward leg as well as the back leg. We want to make sure that the full range of motion is happening without banging the knee on the floor. During the exercise, we want to make sure that he's having a focus on the quadriceps, the hamstrings, the glutes, the calves, and also the hip flexors. The hip flexors are introduced in this exercise due to the fact when he does step back and increase that angle in between his legs, the hip flexors do come in to help, and it can also be a hindrance if their hip flexors are tight. Lastly, the abdominals are definitely used during this exercise as well to maintain balance. It is also important that you make sure that the knee is not jutting all the way past the toes. Next are curtsy lunges. He does 3 sets of 10 here. With a curtsy lunge, I start off by showing the form to my client as I lunge backward, and about the knee to the opposite heel is what you want to go for as you cross over those legs. The curtsy lunge is good for many different things. It's good for flexing the hips, stabilizing the kneecap, and mainly just toning up your legs. With the curtsy lunge, we are focusing more on the stability aspect more than a reverse lunge because we are imbalancing our body. As you can see here, my client is twisting towards the side, which causes instability. And so the core muscles do have to work a little bit harder, as well as the hip flexors and many other stabilizing muscles in the lower body. As I mentioned before with stabilizing the kneecap, as they twist, the kneecap does have to stay put on the stabilizing leg that's staying on the floor. Since the curtsy lunge does focus on a lot of stability, it is very good to do this exercise so we can improve the strength of the lower legs, which will in return let him squat more, deadlift more, just do more daily activities, more with mobility as well, since he is twisting and turning. It does replicate more daily activities and more common activities. It is common for women to focus on a curtsy lunge as well, just because it does give up that toning aspect. It does work on the outer side of your quads and also your gluteus. As women do carry more of their weight on their lower half, including the outside of their quads and their gluteus, as well as the lower back and tummy area. This is why we typically see females doing this exercise, but it's a great exercise for men as well. For the third variation, we have lateral lunges, 3 sets of 10. For the lateral lunges, you'll see that the client's toes are in the same direction or near the same direction as he steps backward. You can see here that I'm just telling the client to make sure that he's pushing his hips back in order to get the full range of motion of that bending knee. We want to make sure that we do these a little bit slow to make sure that we're being safe on the inner part of our thigh. Here you can see that the client scooted a little bit forward as well, just to take out any aspect of him like pulling forward in the TRX band. We want to make sure that that's just for stability and extra resistance on the client. The lateral lunges are great for a lot of different reasons, mainly because they do target the glutes very, very well. They target the gluteus minimus, medius, and the tensor fascia latae, as well as the inner thighs as they go to each side. Since this is a unilateral side movement, it is good that we switch on each side, making sure that we don't create any imbalances in the body. We want to make sure that we're doing the same amount on each side. In this case, he did 3 sets of 10 on each side. One common mistake that you want to avoid is too much excessive leaning forward, especially with the TRX bands as they try to pull on you, or as you try to use their assistance, you kind of pull forward on them. Also, the knee jutting out towards the outside of the foot. We want to make sure that the knee is still in line with the toes, coming around those toes area. Modality number 5, body weight. Upper body, starting with push-ups, 3 sets of 10. Body weight push-ups are a great way to enhance the strength in the upper body. They do hit a many big muscle groups as well. Along with that, with proper form, they'll also help your core and your lower back by bracing that as you come down and up in the movement. The main muscles are the triceps, the pectoralis major, and the pectoralis minor, as well as the shoulders of the anterior deltoids. The second variation, we have incline push-ups, 3 sets of 10. In the incline push-up, you want to make sure that you have a bench, a chair, or any type of surface that is about up to your knee height. You want to go ahead and place your hands right in the front of it, and then still the same way as a regular push-up on the ground, we will keep maintaining that back straight, squeezing the core in, and keeping the elbows back as you push, as you lower yourself down and push yourself back up. We want to make sure that the butt doesn't come up in the air or droop down low. If you start your client off with a regular on the floor push up and it is too hard for them, this is a great way to make it a little bit easier as you take out some of the gravity forcing against the client and give them a different angle to go by. This will make it easier for them. The third modality, we have decline push-ups with 3 sets of 10. For the decline push-up, you want to still use the same bench, chair, anything that comes up to about knee height, and you want to go ahead and place your client or yourself's foot on it just as the regular push-up stance would be. And again, we want to maintain that flat back all the way throughout the body stance as you do the push-up, leaving your elbows coming back and your chest dropping to the floor as you push back. With a decline push-up, you are still using your chest muscles. However, we're more focusing on the upper chest muscles to make them bigger and stronger as well, and really just isolating those upper muscles while still including your triceps and your core muscles as well. Lower body, starting with neutral stance glute bridges for 3 sets of 10. Here, starting with a neutral stance glute bridge, I'm just demonstrating for the client to make sure that his hips, knees, and toes are all in line at the same time. We want to make sure that the distance between the ankles and the glutes is good, and we want to make sure that the full extension is happening at the top of the motion. Here you can see me adjusting the client's legs just to make sure that the knees are not flaring out as he pushes up or the knees aren't caving in as he pushes up as well. This is usually a common mistake found in many clients. In this exercise, he's mainly working his gluteus maximus, just really getting the full extension at the top of the movement. However, as the hip extends and it involves the hamstrings as well, and the hamstrings do contract at the top as well. Also, during the top of the exercise, while maintaining the straight posture, he's also using his transverse abdominis to not fall to the side. For the second variation, we have glute bridges with toes pointed out for 3 sets of 10. With this exercise, it is very similar to the original neutral stance glute bridge. However, in this one, I am instructing the client to point his toes outward. This is going to put more of a pressure right on his gluteus muscles and take the hamstrings out a little bit, just due to the angle of his feet. This exercise would be great to do if you're looking for glute hypertrophy and as well as taking a little bit of pressure off of those hamstrings. The hamstrings will be used during this exercise as well as the quads a little bit as well, but mainly those gluteus maximus and gluteus minimus muscles. Some common mistakes we see in this exercise is hyperextending your back. We want to make sure that the hips are staying in line and not going too high during the motion. Another mistake we can easily find is a lot of clients do tend to push through their toes. Here you can see my client with his feet flat straight on the floor and he's pushing through the heels, and at no point do those heels come off the floor. So we want to make sure that that's what we're looking for, and always instruct your client to squeeze the glutes at the top of the motion. For the third variation, we have wide stance glute bridges for 3 sets of 10. For wide stance glute bridges, you want to have the client in about the same position as the neutral stance. However, the legs are going to be spread open a little bit further than shoulder width apart and pointed out slightly. Again, with this variation of this exercise, we want to make sure that those knees are not wobbling up at the top as he pushes through his heels. Mainly if you're struggling with engaging your glutes and your knees are caving in a neutral stance, we'll switch to the wide stance just to help out with the contraction of your hamstrings and your glutes, and also add the adductor muscles to come in to help. Modality number 6, cables. For the first variation, we'll start with lower body cable kickbacks for 3 sets of 10. With the cable kickbacks, we had an attachment wrap around the ankle of the client. As he stabilized himself on the cable machine, we want a slight bend forward so that way we can really maximize the glute tension and also the contraction at the top of the movement. For this exercise, we are looking at hypertrophy and strength for the top part of the glutes, but it is also hitting all 3 muscle groups of the gluteus, including the gluteus maximus, gluteus minimus, and gluteus medius. Some common mistakes that you'll see with this exercise is rounding the back a little too much and making that lower back curve as the stomach area kind of comes back in towards the machine. We want to make sure that the hips are pointed forward at all times and it's not kind of going out to the side, which is a common mistake as well. Since he's going straight back with this kickback, he's mainly working that maximus muscle, the gluteus maximus, and fully contracting that upper muscle. He did 3 sets of 10 of these. Glute side kickbacks for 3 sets of 10. With the glute side kick, we want to make sure that the client is hooked up to an attachment on the ankle. As you can see here, he has a slight bend in his knee just to make sure that he doesn't hyperextend the knee as well. And we have him holding on for stability onto the cable machine. Just like the cable kickback, he's also using his gluteus maximus here, just really contracting that at the top. However, with this one, he is using more of his gluteus medius and in those deep muscles of the glutes to pull that weight up. The oblique muscles also come in handy here to just stabilize the body and keep it from swinging, which is a common mistake during this exercise of jerking and pushing that weight up with the whole body. Something important to keep in mind when you are training a client or doing these yourself is that the range of motion can be different, varying per person, just to see where the contraction is at the top of the glutes. For the third variation, we started with 45-degree angled kickbacks for 3 sets of 10. With this exercise, it's a little bit tricky for beginners. However, just like the first exercise, we are kicking back. However, instead of straight back, we're doing about a 45-degree angle from those hips. This will give a greater challenge to the hips as well as bringing in other muscles. As you can see here, the client was jerking up a little bit, so we want to make sure that we slow down that motion and really get that full extension of the knee. This exercise not only works the glute muscles, just like we said in the other past variations, it does work the gluteus maximus very, very well. However, it also works on pelvis stability as it's going in a different angle, kind of coming off to the side. We're making sure that our abs are really tight here, and core stability will come in as well as the hamstrings, the calves, and all 3 muscles of the glutes working together to kick back that weight. Since these are challenging, especially in beginners starting out, we want to make sure that we give them a target. As you can see, my hand is here, just to give them a target place to put their foot in that 45-degree angle. This helps the client not have to look back while performing the exercise. Upper body neutral grip back rows for 3 sets of 10. With the neutral grip back row, we first started out by selecting an attachment where he could use the neutral grip, meaning his thumbs are pointed up towards the ceiling and his palms are facing each other. We want to also make sure that we have a slight bend in our knees, that way we're not locking out our knees at all any time. This will provide a greater stability while he performs the exercise. In this variation of the back row, he is using his latissimus dorsi, his rhomboids, trapezius, and since it is in a neutral grip, we also see the inclusion of the biceps heavily here as well. As you can see, I was touching the back of him. This is to make sure that the client can put his mind to his muscle and make sure that he's squeezing the correct muscles in the back of his body. Single arm neutral grip back row for 3 sets of 10. With the single arm neutral grip row, we did have the same motion going on, however, it was only in one arm at a time. We made sure that we selected an attachment that would just be for the one arm and not anything hanging on the side. This will prevent any type of wobbling of the machine or the cables. During the single arm row, we're still working about the same muscles, the latissimus dorsi, the rhomboids trapezius, and also the biceps brachii. However, it puts more of a focus on all those muscles on each side at a time. It also helps prevent imbalances as we get to work on each one separately. It'll also create a greater stretch. As you can see, the client is able to stretch for the midpoint a little bit easier since the body is able to move with the weight. Did 3 sets of 10 each side. Underhand grip back row for 3 sets of 10. With the underhand grip back row, we want to make sure that we grab an attachment that is a straight bar or something similar. Here we have a slightly curved bar, but this will ensure that he will have equal weight on each side as he provides that under grip to where the palms are facing the ceiling. With this variation, he is working his back muscles. However, we're moving on more towards the lower trap muscles. It'll have a more focus on the biceps and the latissimus dorsi rather than the rhomboids and the upper trapezius. Here you really want to make sure that the legs are slightly bent to maintain the stability of the body so that we're not rocking back and forth during the motion. You want to make sure he gets a full stretch. Right there you can see he gets a full stretch of his back muscles and then he can fully contract in the back. You want to make sure that the shoulder blades are squeezed together and his elbows stay tucked to the sides. A common mistake is the elbows are flared backward or the body comes forward and back as the row is performed. After all that hard work, we're going to go ahead and move on to our cool down. To start the cool down off, we're going to go ahead and start, just like the warm up, we're going to start with our slight jog. The purpose of starting with a jog, which might be seemed as we're continuing the workout, is to slowly decrease that heart rate. It is super important to slowly decrease the heart rate without stopping the exercise abruptly. If you stop the exercise abruptly without cooling down, it will cause the muscles to stop contracting too fast, which can lead to the blood pooling up in your lower extremities, which can make your body slow down the pumping of blood to your heart and brain. This may also result in dizziness or fainting after the workout, which we would like to avoid at all costs. It is important to note that since we are cooling down, you'll see my client kind of just jogging back and forth, not really sprinting, running, or anything like that, as we are trying to take that heart rate from maximal down to a little bit slower. And just like the warm-up, he completed this light jog for 1 minute. After the light jog, we moved into some static stretching. First, I started him off with a sumo stance stretch. Here you can see instead of us going up and down really fast, we want to make sure that we're getting really deep into the squat and opening up the muscles that we just worked. These muscles will include some of the adductor muscles located in the inner leg, as well as his hip flexors, hamstrings, gluteus, and even his quadricep muscles as he rocks back and forth and comes back up and down. It is good to note during the cool down, we want to make sure that we're doing everything that makes the body feel good and really just stretching out the muscles that feel a little bit tired. He completed this stretch for about 30 seconds for those legs. After that exercise, we moved into a warrior pose. This is mainly looked at as a yoga pose, which is found in many different yoga workouts. Here I have the front foot faced forward as the back foot faced about the side, lateral. Although this is a stretch, it might be challenging for the client, so just let them know that way they can come up and down. Here we can see a little bit of soreness in the muscle, so we want to make sure that they're comfortable at all times as well, breathing through the exercise. During the warrior pose, the breathing is really important as those muscles are going to be really challenged. Here, after those 30 seconds on the first side, he switched to the second side. As you can see, we had a little bit of a struggle with the mats kind of slipping, but make sure that the place where the feet are really stable with a lot of grip. After a little bit of that dynamic stretching, we want to move into a little bit more of a static stretch as well as on the floor stretches. These are going to really bring down that heart rate even more, as well as relax the muscles as we go through the motions to stretch those muscles out. This is called the downward dog. Like since we just worked out our hamstrings, glutes, and our quads, they might be a little bit tight, so we want to make sure that we're allowing the client to go in and out of the motion as comfortable. This will really lengthen out those hamstrings and focus on those hamstrings as well. We want to make sure that the back is flat at all times and we have a pretty good stability onto those palms of the hands. During this exercise, it not only lengthens those hamstring muscles and posterior leg muscles, it also focuses on the upper body as well as elongating the spine. He held and did this position for about 30 seconds with allotted breaks in between if necessary. After that exercise, we moved on to a really relaxing exercise which we call a child's pose. Here we're on our knees with our ankles tight together. We want to make sure that all the way from the top of the spine down to the bottom is straight at all times, but we're relaxing through the center of it. I did cue my client to make sure that he can always just crawl those fingertips forward just to really elongate the spine, the latissimus dorsi, and the lower parts of the back muscles. After 15 seconds on that side, we switched to the left side to really focus on the right latissimus dorsi. Here we want to make sure that we're putting all of our pressure into the right hip and really just focusing on the stretch of the lat as well as tightening the core to make sure that we feel it all the way through the trunk. After those 15 seconds, we had the client switch to the other side, just crawl all the way over to the next side, which will be focusing on the opposite latissimus dorsi. It is really important to make sure that the head is down during this exercise instead of having it up facing forward. I really like to use this exercise to really breathe out, get nice good breaths right after a really hard workout, as it feels really nice to alleviate all those muscles. Next, we go into the cat and cow. During the cat and cow, we make sure that we round the back all the way at the top and stretch it out all the way at the bottom. This is really, really good to alleviate the back and all the way through the erector spinae muscle groups, as well as the upper and lower extremities of the back. During the workout, we saw a lot of involvement of the trapezius, the rhomboids, the lats, and the posterior side of the deltoids. So we want to make sure that we're properly cooling them down. After 30 seconds of the cat and cow position, we had him go into a cobra. This one we're going to go ahead and start in the pronated position with the tummy on the ground and the chest on the ground. Here we want to make sure that we relax all the way through the lower extremities, all the way from the quads, all the way down to those toes as he pushes up the top half of his body. This is really going to stretch all the way through the trunk, as well as all of the abdominal muscles coming from the anterior to the posterior side of the body. This is also a really good exercise to breathe through. After 30 seconds of that, we got back up for a little bit more of static stretching. We did stretch out our quads a little bit. These ones are going to be a static stretch. This one we really want to focus on holding that heel all the way up to the glutes as we push forward our pelvis. The more we push forward our pelvis, the longer the stretch we get in the front of the quadricep muscle. He did about 15 seconds on the first side before switching to the next side to start stretching that one out. Again, we want to push that pelvis forward as we stretch out each side of the muscle, really getting both sides lengthened out. After the quadricep muscle, we want to make sure that we also lengthen out the hamstrings, as they did a lot of work today in our workout. This one is called the front forward fold. As he comes, he's going to bend halfway just at the hips, making sure to push back the glutes and really get a nice solid stretch in the hamstrings as he relaxes the top part of the body. In this exercise, the top part of the body is pulled down by gravity to help out those hamstrings. This one he did for 15 seconds before moving on to a lying knee to chest exercise. Here, the client is going to be placed in a supinated position on the floor. Here, he's going to go ahead and hug the lower part of his knee and pull it towards his chest. This is also a really relaxing exercise to kind of cool down that body as well as decrease the heart rate. As his knee is pulled to his chest, we're really focusing on a lot of the lower extremity muscles to be stretched here, some of which include the erector spinae group, the latissimus dorsi, the gluteus medius, minimus, and maximus, as well as the thoracolumbar fascia. This one is really important to really stretch out all of the muscles synergistically. After 30 seconds of that, 15 seconds on each side, we moved into a hamstring stretch while seated. This one he's going to start with one of his sides, just grabbing as far as he can. In some clients, we might be able to not hit the toes. This is okay. We just want to make sure that they're rounding their back and just stretching as much as possible to get to as far as they can. It's important not to overstretch these muscles as they can be torn and stretched a little bit too far during this exercise. After 15 seconds on each side, he went to go ahead and go through the middle. Again, this might be limited towards the client itself, which may be a little bit inflexible as my client is here. You can see the knees are coming up. We want to make sure that the knees are glued down as much as possible. After 15 seconds of those, we moved into our butterfly stretch. This one we're going to have the bottom part of the plantar fascia just pointed towards the inside of our feet. As we hold those two together, we're going to go ahead and take the legs through a range of motion up and down as much as we can. Lastly, we want to make sure that the client is comfortable as well as yourself if you're performing this stretch. We want to make sure that we're not overexerting our flexibility, and which can include to an injury in the inner part of the thighs. This concludes my first video assignment for strength and conditioning. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.